Monster Hunter should have failed. It was released on the wrong console with technology that nobody really understood, with gameplay that players found frustrating, and mechanics that literally were designed to punish you. And yet, it became one of Capcom's most important franchises. Which is kind of funny, because Monster Hunter was never designed to be successful. It was designed to justify a piece of hardware. To understand why Monster Hunter exists, first you gotta understand the problem that Sony was trying to solve. You see, in the early 2000s, Sony wasn't simply winning the console war. They were absolutely dominating. Hell, there wasn't even a console war. There was the PS2 and whatever was left for us. So, I hear you ask, if Sony was dominating the market, what is this problem they were trying to solve? And first of all, why are you British? Second of all, the key here is that Sony wasn't thinking about the present. They were busy thinking about the future. And they hit the nail in the head, because what they had in mind for the future of gaming was online. There was just one problem though. Nobody knew how to build a game for online. Literally, not Sony, not any developers. Hell, the players didn't even know they wanted online on their games. But where everyone saw uncertainty, Capcom saw an opportunity to build something new, something that could only exist because of the internet. Monster Hunter was not designed as a franchise. They were designed as an experiment, an attempt, if you will, to prove that cooperation was in the future of gaming just as much as competition. And literally every single aspect of this game, to this day, is designed around that belief. First, we need to go back to what gaming looked like on the year 2000. Because back then, so that was a goddamn Jonas Brothers reference. I hope at least one of you got it. Because back then, Sony wasn't even struggling with content or sales. They were unstoppable. The PlayStation 2 came out on March of 2000 on Japan, and by the end of its life cycle, it would have sold over 155 million units, making it the best-selling console of all damn history. But the PS2 didn't succeed just because it was powerful. The damn thing was practically a Swiss Army knife for gaming. Besides the giant game library for the PS2, this console was also backwards compatible. Besides of that, it was affordable, and on top of that, it could read DVD videos, which I know it sounds kind of stupid right now because we have streaming, but you gotta remember back then, this is exactly the time where the DVD was replacing the VHS. So this was huge, because this meant that for many households, the PlayStation 2 wasn't just their first gaming console, they were also their first DVD player. Outside, it looked like Sony had already won. But like I mentioned, internally, Sony wasn't thinking about the present. They were thinking about what came next. In the early 2000s, online gaming for console was not the norm. Unlike their PC counterpart, where games like Diablo 2, Ultima Online, and EverQuest proved that online worlds could be inhabited and a workable force for a game. But on console, the idea was still very experimental, unproven, basically risky. And don't take it from me, Sony's main competitor, Sega, tried and failed at online gaming with their own console, the Dreamcast. The Dreamcast launched in 1999 with a built-in modem, making it the first true console to be designed with online gaming in mind. It was ambitious, it was innovative, it was ahead of its time, and it was doomed to fail, which understandably made Sony cautious, to the point that the PlayStation 2 didn't even launch with built-in modem. Instead, Sony went through the route of, on 2001 in Japan and then later on 2002 worldwide, release a network adapter for the PS2. This was an optional add-on that connected to the back of the console and added two essential things. First, it was an Ethernet port, and second, it was a hard drive interface. This turned the PS2 into a purely offline machine, into something that could connect players across the world, or at least That's the idea. Because, like I mentioned, there was a huge problem here. The infrastructure was ready to go, yes, but they didn't have games that actually used it. No one did. And without software, there is no use. And without actual use, this network adapter, it's just a piece of plastic. Sony needed developers to justify the existence of this adapter. And there is where Capcom entered the picture. By the early 2000s, Capcom was on an unusual position because they weren't failing by any means, but they weren't evolving either. This ties back to the creative debt that I was talking about on my Resident Evil video. You see, Capcom was known for arcade-style hits like Resident Evil, Devil May Cry, Street Fighters. These games were tightly designed, self-contained experiences. But the industry was changing. Games were becoming larger, connected, and more persistent, and Capcom had never built anything like this before. And at the same time, Sony began actively encouraging developers to experiment with online features on their games, because they urgently needed games that could demonstrate what the network adapter could do. They say that luck is when preparation meets opportunity, and as soon as the network adapter came out, Capcom saw that opportunity. They weren't thinking of just making another game, they were trying to explore something entirely different. Instead of making a game that players would finish and forget, they began exploring the idea of a game that players would inhabit. A game designed around cooperation, not competition or high scores. Just co-op survival with big bosses. And again, you gotta understand that this is a wild idea for the times. Nobody had done this before because most action games were based around empowering the player, but Monster Hunter was based around vulnerability. They were building a gameplay loop that would reward preparation instead of reflexes, where patience mattered more than aggression, and where success depended on other people. But before Monster Hunter existed, it started as something much smaller. An internal experiment, a prototype designed to answer one single question. Could cooperation be the foundation of an entire game? In the early 2000s, Capcom wasn't trying to create a new IP. They were trying to understand the internet. The PlayStation 2 network adapter had brought in a new possibility, yes, but also, like I mentioned before, a new problem, because literally no one knew what a console online experience was supposed to feel like. There was no blueprint, no genre, no proven formula. It was the gold rush of online gaming. There were no rules, so instead of committing to a single idea, Capcom decided to broaden the experiments. Internally, Capcom began prototyping multiple experiments based around online play. According to interviews with producer Ryozo Sugimoto and the Capcom staff, they stated that the goal wasn't to replicate PC online games like the MMORPGs, specifically because those games require subscription and Jesus Christ, number one reason why I never got into MMOs, I hated that. And besides subscriptions, they required massive development infrastructures and development cycles that Capcom simply wasn't built for at the moment. Instead, they wanted something simpler, something modular, something that could be experienced in sessions, bite-sized fun, if you will. This led to three core and fundamental experiments. The first one was online combat. The second one was co-op dungeon exploration. And the third one was co-op hunting. Players worked together to track, fight, and defeat a single powerful creature. And almost immediately, it was clear that the hunting game created tension in a way that the other experiments just didn't. Because, unlike another player fighting against you on the same game, the monsters didn't have to play fair. The monsters didn't follow a predictable pattern, something that would later change. They didn't care about balance, something that would never change. So the monster was always stronger than you, and that meant that the players would have to rely on one another, not because the game told you to, but because success demanded it. This prototype would become the foundation of Monster Hunter. Now, with the idea loaded in the chamber, the next step was building a team that could make it a reality. Monster Hunter was developed on the Capcom Production Studio 1, the same studio that created Resident Evil and Devil May Cry, but this game was treated differently. This game was a brand new blank canvas, which meant two things. First of all, we didn't have the same budget as those two loved franchises, but on the other side, we don't have the same level of expectations. This was experimental, a chance to be risky, to be creative, and one of their earliest decisions would define the franchise forever. They choose to remove the player's power. What does that mean? Well, in most action games, the player feels empowered. They are fast, responsive, and clearly dominant over the enemies. But Monster Hunter did the opposite. In here, the weapons are heavy, the swings are slow, and you are committed to your animations, meaning that once you swung your weapon, you couldn't cancel it. You have to live with the decision that you made. And this wasn't a limitation of the hardware by any means. This was intentional, because if the player can't react instantly, they have to wait. They have to observe and prepare. But most importantly, they have to rely on each other. But as in literally every single step on this journey, there was a tiny little problem. Early data on the prototype of this game showed that a lot of the players were dying a lot because they were playing the game wrong. They were trying to rush the boss like this was Devil May Cry or some other random action game. But Monster Hunter was never just another random action game. This was a hunting game, like Cabela's Big Game Hunting. Oh, you know what I'm talking about. Success on a hunt didn't come from speed. Yet, it came from patience, observation, and preparation. Because my God, this game punished you if you didn't prepare correctly, okay? This was a whole different game if you came unprepared. So the new plan was to lean into that. They made the monsters unpredictable and powerful, able to kill you if you weren't careful. Because the goal wasn't to empower the player immediately. The goal was to create growth. Victory was something players earned, not something they were given. And the reward wasn't just progression or an even cooler armor. The reward was mastery, because Monster Hunter wasn't made to be beaten. It was made to be learned. Monster Hunter released on March 11 of 2004 on Japan for the PS2. And on paper, it was exactly what Sony had hoped for, what they needed. A fully realized co-op game designed specifically to justify the existence of the network adapter. But, like always, there was another quintessential problem. Almost no one had the network adapter. So that means that most of the players couldn't even experience Monster Hunter that way it was intended to. Online, the game felt slower, more difficult. The systems were still there, the weapons, the preparations, the danger, but the cooperation was missing. And without cooperation, Monster Hunter could feel brutal. Especially the first game. That game was unforgiving, almost hostile to the players, which meant that the game sold moderately successful at first, which is not a failure, but it's not a breakout success either, which is really worrying when you understand how cutthroat this industry can be. And it would have been easier for Capcom to just abandon Monster Hunter, to call it a fun experiment and just move on. But something unexpected started to happen. The players that understood the game never stopped playing. While Monster Hunter struggled to explode globally, something different happened in Japan. Instead of treating Monster Hunter like a game, they were treating it more like an actual social activity. Like, group of friends would actually get together to hunt monsters in co-op. Again, not because they were told to, but because it was just fun. Monster Hunter rewarded patience, coordination, and discipline. It felt less like a video game and more like a team sports kind of thing. To the point that Capcom noticed that players weren't even just playing Monster Hunter. They were creating memories. Like when you play D&D for the first time and then years later you recall stories from the campaign, nobody goes like, oh, your character did this. Everyone says, you did this. You were the hero. And that's exactly what was happening in Monster Hunter. People were making memories of close victories, of failures, of monsters that took literal hours to defeat. Monster Hunter had broken the line between player and game. It wasn't just content, it was an experience. And with that in mind, Capcom realized that the future of Monster Hunter wasn't on the living room, it was on the player's hands. In 2005, Capcom released Monster Hunter Portable for the PSP, and this decision changed everything because the PSP removed the single biggest obstacle that Monster Hunter had: the lack of a network adapter. People no longer needed internet infrastructure. Now we can connect locally, anywhere we want. Friends could sit together, hunt together, fail together, and try again. Together! This transformed Monster Hunter from an online experience to a cultural phenomenon. And with that, Monster Hunter proved something that the industry didn't fully understand yet. Players didn't just want to win, they wanted to surpass impossible odds. Monster Hunter didn't succeed because it followed industry trends. Quite the opposite, actually. It succeeded because it ignored them. This game wasn't designed to empower the player, it was designed to challenge them. At its heart, Monster Hunter still holds the same core belief that victory should not be given, it should be earned. And maybe that's why the game survived, because long before live service was a buzzword, and long before every game tried to keep you playing forever, Monster Hunter understood something simple. Players don't just want content, they want stories. They want to remember the hunt that almost went wrong, the monster that caught them 3 times, the moment everything clicked. Look, Monster Hunter wasn't created to be a franchise. They were created to solve a problem, and somehow that problem created one of Capcom's most important pillars. Not because they chased the future, but because they believed in something different. And sometimes that's enough. Thank you for watching.